Cool. All right, well, hello everybody. Thanks for having me out here, especially April for allowing me to talk a little bit to you guys about what I'm doing and hopefully what you guys can be doing as well. So for you, those of you guys that don't know me, my name is Ryan Schroep. I joined Sub2 almost exactly a year and a half ago. April hosted. Sub2 is the mentorship that we're in that's done by Pace Morby, all around creative finance, business, and all of those things. And so I joined Sub2 with no real estate experience a year and a half ago. April held a meetup probably a week or two after we had joined. And the rest is kind of history for that. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit today about what I've been up to, what you guys might be able to do that's similar and maybe completely different than what I have done. But what I do want to say is, first of all, why should you listen to me? You probably shouldn't. I don't recommend listening to anything I say. But if you do decide to listen to me, a couple things is that, again, I joined Sub2, which is a mentorship, a year and a half ago. I had just moved to Jacksonville and just gotten my W-2 as an electrical engineer out of college when I moved here. Within the first year, I was able to replace that income from being an engineer and go full-time into real estate and quit my job, which I know is kind of the pipe dream, right, in real estate. And then since then, I've been able to create 3 separate businesses that all bring in more income than my job did initially. So if that's helpful, hopefully I can explain a little bit about what I was able to do to accomplish that. But because that's kind of a large spanning thing, I'm going to kind of condense that down today into a couple different topics, all revolving around how to win. So whether it's real estate or anything else, how to win. And when I'm talking today, what I'm going to talk about is, first of all, how anybody can win, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of your situation. The second thing is how I, quote unquote, won, or whatever you want to call what I've been doing. And then the third thing, and the most important, is how you can figure out what you need to do to win as well. And so as humans, when we're looking at trying to figure out how to win, I think instead of looking at winning and what we need to do to win, it's actually a lot easier for us to look at what we would need to do to absolutely fail, because we're humans and we're always thinking about worst case scenario, right? So how can you guarantee that you're going to lose? I think is a very easy framework to use, because we're always going to think of what's the worst case scenario. What can I do wrong? How can I make this move in real estate or whatever the venture is and completely ruin my life forever, right? Kind of dark, but it's an easier way to think because we all do it. And so when you think of, all right, what is the thing I can do that's going to guarantee that I'm going to fail? What's something that you guys think of? Like, just throw stuff at me. What can you do that's going to guarantee you fail?
Quit. Nothing.
Quit. Do nothing. Not pay your bills. That's a good one. That's a big failure. Yeah, so really, really simple things, right? Do nothing. We heard that right off the bat. Do nothing. And I'll go more into that because that's one of the most important ones. Do nothing. Try and do it alone, right? Anybody in here that's been staring at their computer screen for the last 6 months and hasn't gotten anywhere, there's probably a reason behind that. Using fuzzy targets, another really common one, right? You have no idea what you're doing. You're just trying to accomplish something. You're trying to quote unquote win, like I said, but you don't actually have any idea what you're doing. And then the third one would be playing the victim, right? I can't do it for whatever reason. And so these are all really simple concepts because we're always going to think of how to fail. But once we've figured out how to fail and we've thought about that in the mindset that we all as humans have, all we have to do is flip that stuff, right? So it's, again, seems very simple, but yet if you look at your own life, there's a lot of times that you don't do it. So instead of do nothing, all you have to do is do something. Do anything, right? How many people in here have heard of the 100-hour rule? Does anybody know what the 100-hour rule is? So for those of you guys that don't know, the 100-hour rule is really simple. If you go and do anything for 100 hours in a year, you're going to be better at that thing than 95% of people. 100 hours breaks down to 18 minutes a day. So Pace, our mentor, likes to talk about it as the 18-minute rule. Right? What can you do 18 minutes a day that's going to get you closer to your goal? And if you do that thing, you're going to be better than 95% of people. So instead of do nothing, just do anything. Instead of trying to do it alone, squat up. Do it together. Right? The reality is if you are trying to do something new that you haven't done before, you probably kind of suck at it because you haven't done it before. Right? And so instead of trying to just keep doing whatever that thing is, what you can do instead is squat up and get around people like this. Right? Join a community, join a mentorship, go to networking events, whatever it may be, and utilize the people around you to get where you're trying to go faster. Using fuzzy targets, just get focused. It's impossible for so many people to do, it seems like, but if you get focused, you're going to get where you're trying to go faster. A great quote that I heard recently from Dean Graziosi at the mastermind that we had a couple months ago was that fuzzy targets don't get hit. Right? So if you have no idea where you're going, then how are you going to be able to track if you're getting closer or not? And then last one, play the victim, skip the excuses. The quote there is there's always somebody that's had it a lot worse than you that's done a lot more, right? So whatever situation you're in, whether it's impossible or not, it doesn't really matter because there's always a way to get through that thing. And that is going to be what's going to propel you forward. So this is kind of the framework that I want to work off of today. And to get started, I want to start with an example because a lot of what I've done in the last 6 months has revolved around talking to newer people that are getting started in real estate that may not have a super good idea of what they need to do to get started, or are calling me saying, nothing's working out, I'm not making any money, I feel like I'm failing, whatever it may be. And so this is a conversation right here that I have every single day. Every single day with different people, and it looks something like this. Hey, I want to get started in real estate. And I say, great. Well, what have you done to get there? And what do you guys think they say? Nothing. They haven't done anything, right? Because the problem is everybody comes up with an excuse for why they haven't been able to accomplish what they're trying to do, right? So they come to me and they say, well, check this out. 6 months from now, I'm going to have this little window of time where my job, it's tax season, so we're too busy during tax season, or it's the end of Q4 and we just get way too busy. And there's always something. And so what they say is they don't just say nothing, they say nothing but, and then they give me the reason why, right? There's always something. But the reality of that situation that, again, is very common, is that no matter what your situation is, if you wait until it's really easy to do something, then the second things get hard again, you're gonna forget it. You're gonna screw up, you're not gonna do it anymore. But imagine if you came to me and said, I have absolutely no free time to work on this, but yet somehow, some magic way, I've found the time to spend those 18 minutes a day on this thing. Well, now, all of a sudden, when things get really easy, you can double down on it. You can spend more time on it instead of going the other way where you just fail. So that is the scenario that I'm going to be building off of today. But I want to talk about what I did, of course, because I'm not an expert in a lot of things, but I guess technically I'm an expert in myself. So here's what I did. And there's two different ways to look at it. And I want to give you guys a timeline of just, like I said, the last year and a half of my life and what it's looked like from two different perspectives. So framework number one is I joined Sub 2. And when I joined Sub 2, it's a paid mentorship. We could get into paying for mentorships later on. But what I can tell you is I spent more money doing that than anything I've ever spent money on in my entire life. Okay? And after I joined Sub 2, the first thing that I did was I started working on what's called the Lonza method. So what the Lonza method is basically reaching out to wholesalers, people that find real estate and try and buy it for, or sell it, for an upcharge, a fee. We find those wholesalers and we say, hey, do you have any dead leads? We could work on those dead leads, maybe utilize some creative finance, make some money together. So that's the Lonza method. And can anybody guess how much money I made working on the Lonza method? $0, right? No money made on the Lonza method. So I worked on that for a little bit, and then I moved on to the next thing that I heard everybody say, which is that I should start doing some Calendly calls, right? And just connect with people, talk to other people in the business. And when I did that, it was great, but of course I made $0. So I started getting into multifamily. The next big thing was some really cool people in this room, and we learned all about multifamily, super exciting stuff, talked to brokers, spent pretty much a solid 3 months working on multifamily, but of course at the end of that, $0. And so after that, I started calling agents for on-market properties, which is something I'll talk more about later. But I started calling agents because that's what everybody else seemed to be doing, and they seemed to be making money doing it. Didn't make any money, but I kept doing it because I saw a lot of people having success. Still didn't make any money, but I kept doing it, and eventually, I still didn't make any money. All right? So that's framework number one. This was basically, I would say, the last year, or I guess 18 months ago to 6 months ago looked like this. But let's look at it from a different framework, right? This is frame number two, the exact same action. So I joined Sub 2, and the first thing I did was I learned the importance of community, right? So this is something that I think everybody understands in some capacity, but they may not necessarily understand it on the level that I feel I do now after being involved in a community like Sub 2. So I learned about community, and then I started working on the Lonza method, and what did I do? I learned creative terms, right? I just learned about creative finance. There's so much to learn. It could go on forever. So I learned creative terms, and then I started doing Calendly calls, and I learned all the different options for what I could be doing to make money in real estate. Because if you haven't noticed, everybody in this room, and probably everybody you know, makes money in real estate in a different way, right? So there's a ton of different options there. Then I started learning multifamily, and I learned how to underwrite multifamily deals, a very complicated process that took me months to kind of start to nail down and learn. Then I started calling agents, and I learned how to pull a list, right? How many people in here have no idea how to pull like a low equity list and just rip houses off the internet where, they have no equity on there? So that's something that I didn't know how to do. So I learned how to pull a list, and then I kept calling agents, and I learned confidence on the phones, which is very difficult and quite literally can only be done through reps. So kept doing that, and then I called some more agents, and I learned how to overcome objections. Another really big one. A lot of people find agents that need to sell Sub 2, but they have no idea how to overcome questions like, What if the due on sale clause comes up? Or what about my liability? So these are two different frameworks, but which one of these is going to get you where you want to go? Right? I know it's pretty obvious, but the first framework, the most important thing to me is that there's a lot of things in there that I don't have control over. Right? I didn't have control necessarily over whether or not I made money. Sure, I probably could have done things a little differently and made more money faster, but I didn't have real control over that. But in frame number 2, what's important is that I did have full control over that. Right? There was nobody telling me that I could or couldn't do the Lonza method or get into multifamily or make phone calls. That's something that I had full control over. And so after that year of making no money, with the two perspectives you can look at, you can say, well, what changed that got me to where I am now that I'll talk more about? And what I would say is, in one sense, nothing changed, right? Nothing actually changed with what I was doing because I wasn't looking at it from a perspective of, am I making $0, am I making $1 million? I was just looking at it from a perspective of, what am I continuing to do to get closer to the goal? And for me, I was just working every single day, 18 minutes a day. Really, it's more than 18 minutes, but you get the point. I was just working every day, so nothing changed, but it was not that nothing changed, it was just that nothing I did change. The results did change. And so I do want to break down my businesses for you guys a little bit because I think it'll be helpful and hopefully cool to see. So here's what my businesses look like now. The first business that I started was an EMD lending business. So what Pace Morby has coined this is Gator lending, and the idea behind it is EMD is earnest money deposit, right? That's basically like your safety deposit when you're buying a house or your down payment when you buy a house, right? And so how I got started in that was I just saw other people that were doing it, making money, and I thought, this is a really cool concept. I'm interested. I have some money set aside. Let's try it out. And so I started doing EMD lending, and what I did was I just started talking to other people that were doing it, asking them what was working, what wasn't working, how it works, because conceptually, there's a lot of things in EMD lending that are kind of mind-boggling because you make really high returns on your money. And a lot of people, the first question they ask is, why would anybody be willing to pay that much money? And so to answer that question, what I will say is that for EMD lending, if somebody was to wholesale a deal, does anybody in here not know what wholesaling is? Cool, all right. So if somebody was to wholesale a deal, and they're gonna go make $20,000 on this wholesale deal, but in order to make that $20,000, they need to put $3,000 down in a deposit. So $3,000 unlocks $20,000. But they've got 10 rentals that they just went and bought, and they're running an ad campaign with a bunch of money, and they don't have any free money to just throw into this account. Well, essentially, the way you would look at it is, if they don't get that $3,000, they don't get this $20,000 for the wholesale deal. So what I do is I come to them and say, hey, guess what? I do have $3,000 for you guys. And when you take my $3,000, you're going to unlock that $20,000, but I'm going to charge you 40, 50, sometimes more % interest on that loan. And so I make 50% interest, 40% interest, whatever the deal may be, on my loan for 30 days, which is mind-boggling, right? It's like 500% annual returns. Crazy. But they go and make an extra $15,000. So it's a pretty good deal for them too, right? So Gator lending was actually what I did to quit my job. So I learned about this stuff, and I started learning everything I could, and then I reached out to people that I knew that were wholesaling deals, and I basically just started looking for what we would call warm leads, right? People that I was already in contact with that might need this quote-unquote service. And in doing so, I was able to start lending for people, start benefiting people from money I had set aside that I wasn't really sure what to do with yet in real estate. And I was able to replace my income. So literally, I started doing this lending, and a month after I started, I quit my job. So it's kind of a short story of how I quit my job. It just happened really quickly. Obviously, you saw there was a bit of a runway to getting there. But once I actually started lending, it was pretty quick. Hey, people need this money. I have the money. Give them the money. They pay me a really high return. It's enough money. I'll quit my job. It's basically what it looked like. So now, I started my first Gator lending deal, I think was May of last year, so 6-ish months. As of right now, I've passed 75 Gator lending transactions, 75 transactions. I have 25 transactions in escrow right now. And this month, I'm set to net at least $25,000 just from Gator lending. So it's a pretty beneficial business, right? So very cool business. But what I want to continue to go on with that business is that when you get started, there may be some people in here that have no idea how they want to start, right? They don't have a real plan for what they're trying to do. And what I'll say is that you just saw the timeline of what I did. I didn't have a plan either. I didn't know exactly what I was trying to do. There was no common denominator there except for that I was doing something, right? And so what Gator lending for me was just that something that finally caught on. It was that something that triggered everything else. And so from Gator lending, I started getting involved, right? I started meeting more people, connecting with more people, making money with more people. And that led me into getting into wholesaling, which I never thought I would do. I did not intend to get into wholesaling when I started, but because I started Gator lending, I started seeing kind of the value in making this money, because although I did make money lending to people, they were making more money, right? So I want to go do that too. Why not? So that's when I started doing creative wholesaling. And that was a very long process to get into wholesaling. But what I can say is that my wholesaling looks a lot different from many people's wholesaling, but I particularly am just wholesaling on-market deals with agents, right? I've never done a deal that didn't involve an agent. I've never done a deal that was not a subject to deal where I took over somebody's mortgage. So 100% of our deals are taking over people's mortgages. We have never not paid an agent on a deal. An agent always gets their commission. We have never had a seller not make any money on a deal, so they get their money. And we take over a deal and everybody's happy, right? So that business came as a result of my lending business, and it's great. I think quarter four, I had to look at the numbers this morning. So I think quarter four, our lending company did $162,000 in wholesale fees, gross. $162,000 in quarter four, and that was on, I believe, 18 to 20 transactions. So lots of wholesaling, right? Lots of closing deals, lots of connections through that. And when I started working on my wholesale company, another thing came up. You might sense kind of a theme here for how this stuff starts to waterfall. So when I started working on wholesaling, I was having trouble finding more leads. And because of that, I tapped into the engineer from 2 months prior and started working on a software. And that software was really basic. It was just a software that was going to be basically sifting through leads, finding the leads that were most likely to work for subject to deals with agents. That's all it was. And so those businesses, we've got the EMD lending business, we've got the wholesale business, $162,000 in 4 months, so about $40,000 a month gross there. And then the software business that right now does between $5,000 to $6,000 a month. That's recurring revenue because it's subscription based. So each one of those businesses on its own has replaced the income from my engineering job. And the even cooler thing is that each one of those businesses came as a result of the business before that, right? And so that waterfall effect for those businesses, it's not that I have, I think it's always said like a millionaire has at least 7 streams of income or whatever. I want to make a point with that to say that those streams of income are not a result of starting 7 different businesses at the same time. Those streams of income, most often, and for me, came from starting a business, focusing on that business, and then building businesses as a result of those. And so because of that, I've now got more businesses that I'll be building on top of that. And like I said, each one of those businesses is pretty individual and pretty separate, and especially with the lending and wholesaling business, I could answer questions and go on about it forever. And so what I want to do is I kind of want to continue on here and then just come back to that, if you guys are cool with it, later when we're hanging out, and you guys can ask me questions if I can do anything to be helpful, whether it's a specific question or a general question. Happy to answer it, but I'm going to keep rolling so that we can get on to the next thing. So what I want to say is, and I mean this in all honesty, I'm not special. There's nothing about me that's special. When I was going from zero, going from having my job to where I am now with all these different businesses, I didn't get a shout out from the President of the United States. I didn't do anything crazy. Like there was no one defining moment. It was just those things stacking on top of each other over a long amount of time. And one of the biggest realizations that I've had this year is that if you guys think of whoever your idol is, your role model for whatever you're trying to accomplish, what I did, and maybe nobody else in here does it, but what I did is I always thought, well, they're just special, right? That person has something, whether it's their ability to speak in front of a crowd or their ability to sell or persuade or whatever. But the more that I got into the business, the more I started hanging out with those types of people, there was a couple things I realized. 2 of the most important ones being they're just normal people. And number 2, seriously, they're not special. There's nothing crazy that these people are doing. But what was a common theme with all these people is the behind the scenes work that people don't think about or talk about, right? These people that you're like, oh, they blew up out of nowhere. It's never the case. It's literally never the case, right? These people have been working for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years before you ever heard about them. So by the time you get to them, you think that there's some miraculous person when in reality, they just did the work long before anybody else was paying attention. So let's talk about you guys. What is your next best step to getting started? This is a framework that I use when I'm on these calendar calls with newer students, newer people trying to get into investing in entrepreneurship that I think is really important. And it's a 3-step framework that's asking yourself, what do you have the most of? Do you have more time, expertise, or money? All right? These are 3 levers that you can operate off of. Because somebody that has more time than anything else should not be doing the same thing as the person that has more money, right? And so utilizing this framework can help you a lot in figuring out what the next best thing to do is. Is it going to be the thing that you do for the rest of your life? Probably not. but it gives you a next best step. And this is the framework that I used for what I was doing. So there's two options that you have from here. The first one is to keep doing what you're doing now and hope it works. And maybe for some people in here that's working, and if it is, you should keep doing it. Whatever you're doing that's working, do that. Option number two is take a step back, make a plan, and get accountable with that plan. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit to close out, which is what I want you guys to do right now. So if everybody can pull out their phones and jump in their notes and just try this same framework, the same thing that I do on my calls every single day. And it's the framework of time, money, and expertise. So I want you to go on your phone and just write out those three levers, right? Those three things in order of what you have the most availability. So do you have more time, more expertise, more money, and just go 1 to 3. And as you're doing that, what I want to say is that the important thing in doing that isn't just having it on your phone. It's you actually realizing what you should be focusing on. So that when we leave today and we go hang out over there and we're all talking, you can ask the right questions, you can talk to the right people, and you can connect with people that are going to get you where you want to go. Because you guys may hear me talking about how I'm doing all these wholesale deals. What you don't realize is that I do this full time, all day, like 12, 16-hour days. It takes a lot of time. So you may not have the time to run a full-scale wholesale business. And if you don't have the time, if time's on the bottom of your list, then please stop spending all of your time trying to figure out how to do that. Because if you don't have time, the reality is you probably have one of the other two things. Now, if you don't have any of these things, then just focus on building one of them up so that you got something that you can go off of. But the reality is, for most people, one of those things is going to outweigh the others, and that's going to be a great place to start. So that's pretty much it.